Today we'll be taking a look at an episode of X-Files, a show that's like Goosebumps, except for kids whose parents are divorced. The X-Files, being a show in no real need of an introduction, follows two FBI agents documenting the average nightlife in a British city. With it being a show that heavily relies on the macabre and unknown, it's no surprise that from time to time it would find itself at the centre of controversy, with some people believing that it's treading a very fine line with what's acceptable to be shown on TV, but some people just need to lighten up, because this episode is simply a documentary about where American babies come from. Home, written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong, with them both going on to create Final Destination a few years later, a movie about the importance of fighting people on an airplane. The episode begins in a town named Home, which gives its occupants the perfect excuse to confuse people who ask where they live by simply responding with home. We see a home in Home, as this rural farmhouse owned by the Peacock family is currently filled with these rather handsome looking gentlemen as they get bored during childbirth and decide to do some arts and crafts instead. A baby is born, quickly followed by a baby being unborn because they forgot to pay for health insurance. These three men take it outside during a thunderstorm and decide to make the infant a little closer to the earth by quite literally putting it in it. A scene that was originally supposed to be much more harrowing to watch, but was changed due to an executive at Fox requesting that the audio of the baby's screams be removed, with the director Kim Manners going as far to say that the live burial scene was the most awful shot of his entire career. Yeah, I guess it could have been a bit better. Instead of hearing the cries of the infant, we hear the cries of who I can only assume is the father, brother and uncle, all in one. Talk about multitasking. An undisclosed amount of time then passes, as we then see a group of boys playing baseball in that very field, with one of the boys looking down to realise that he's been squishing his foot into the remains, and now his new shoes are ruined. The boy reports the funny looking flower, and the series protagonists arrive, FBI investigators, Detective Mulder and Scully, because normal names are for stupid people. While at the scene, they noticed that they're being watched by a group of men from the house, and being extremely sexist towards men, they don't like it. Sheriff Taylor arrives and tells them that they're the Peacock family, a family of peacocks that were turned into a family of humans after a horrific accident, and have forever lost their beautiful feathers, with them instead replacing them with generational incest. He explains that the family was involved in a car accident 10 years ago where both of the parents perished by honouring their birded ancestors and being squished at the side of the road. The boys apparently took the bodies back home and have since kept to themselves with little to no contact with the outside world. And Sheriff Taylor, not really in the mood to do any sheriffing today, tells detectives Mulder and Scully not to get the men involved because he can't really be bothered to do his job properly. Taking the detectives back to the police station, the sheriff pulls the remains out of the communal police fridge in case anyone gets a little peckage later, as they're introduced to the deputy from our imagination, Barney. Examining it in a bathroom cubicle as they apparently plan to flush it like a dead goldfish, they discover that it's absolutely riddled with birth defects and abnormalities, a funny way of saying a British person. Scully believes that the mutations must have been caused by inbreeding, and that because they are so severe, inbreeding that must have gone back many generations, as it looks like we've got ourselves a case of the brother-lover meat touchers. They discover evidence of dirt being inhaled, meaning that the subject was very much buried alive until they were very much not alive. So with their attention once again being redrawn to the Peacock family, the family that it should have been drawn to this entire time, thank you very much Sheriff Taylor, they theorize that if all of the females in the family have been dead for at least a decade, then perhaps the men were acting on their natural instinct to reproduce and have kidnapped a woman. After arriving at the family's home and noticing the bloodied scissors left on the side as no one has cleaned up after their arts and crafts, they're given probable cause to enter, but no one seems to be home. They do discover bloodied footprints on the ground that matches the footprints in the field, as we see that there's someone watching them from beneath the floorboards as they do their best impression of a cockroach. With the peacocks nowhere in sight, Mulder and Scully call it in to have Sheriff Taylor put out arrest warrants for the men, as the foot sniffer beneath the floorboards can hear it all, while simultaneously taking in their foot odor. And in retaliation for someone being so unfair and daring to put out an arrest warrant against a group of criminals, that night the footsucker presumably passes on the information to the men as they proceed to get into their car and pay Sheriff Taylor a visit. The sheriff being the type of guy that doesn't feel the need to keep his gun near him, as he's from a town where people don't lock their doors at night. Two things that he's very much about to regret, while he still contains the ability to feel regret. The car pulls up in his front yard, and looking out of the window to see it empty, he knows who it belongs to and why they're here. His wife hides under the bed as he unleashes a full-powered swing of a baseball bat directly into the stomach of one of the men, without them even registering the impact that would bring most men to their knees. Swinging again at the man's shins, but to absolutely no effect as this baseball bat is made out of foam, the other two brothers walk in for some 3-on-1 bedroom action and brutally kill him. Sniffing around the air and wondering which of the brothers is wearing that cute new perfume, they realize that someone else is in the room with them, and getting incredibly embarrassed when someone else watches them, they flip over the bed and go for the wife too. The next day, Deputy Barney, now promoted to Sheriff Barney, discovers the aftermath at the Taylor house after coming over to discuss the case. But the only thing that he's left discussing is the price that it's going to cost to get that blood out of the carpet. Mulder and Scully arrive and expertly deduce that they were repeatedly hit by wooden objects at great force, before also being handed the infant's lab reports from Barney. Examining the data, Scully believes that the lab must have made some kind of mistake or something due to the amount of gene imbalances being found, implying the DNA given from 3 separate men. But a mistake being something that is simply out of the question due to law enforcement not ever making mistakes ever, not even once, Mulder theorizes that each of the brothers could possibly be the father due to the generations of interfamily breeding causing a mutation that could allow such a thing to be possible. Something that with all my scientific expertise I'm going to label as truth, due for it making an entertaining episode of The X-Files. But Scully mentions that for something like that to even be remotely possible, the females would also need to be a member of the same family and not a random kidnap victim, meaning that the only logical answer to this question is that the brothers have the ability to switch between male and female whenever they want. Anyway, the person beneath the floorboards was actually their mother, as she heard the entire conversation between Mulder and Scully and the ex-sheriff. And back at the house with the sons and their mother, one of the sons are feeding her while accidentally forgetting that he's in fact not a bird, as he chews up his food and regurgitates it into her mouth. This, for some strange reason, gives the mother the idea to tell the men to remove all of their clothes, where she then proceeds to tell them that they're going to need to get ready as people will be coming to take their home away, and the only way that they could do anything about it is if they're completely naked. Mulder, Scully and Barney arrive at the property, while Barney heads up to the front of the house, while the other two stay back to observe. But what they end up observing is Barney's overall size becoming somewhat shorter as he enters through the front door and triggers a booby trap, which causes him to be hit by a swinging axe and unfortunately not a swinging booby. With 2 incredibly competent police officers killed by a group of people whose brother is also their father, Mulder and Scully decide to lure the men out of the house so that they can enter without having to deal with both them and the traps. Letting the pigs free, we then get our first clear look at one of the men as he runs back in to tell his brothers that their fleshlight is running away. With the trio distracted, Mulder uses a piece of wood to push open the front door, causing a spear to fly right into it. And despite making such a big deal of sneaking into the house and avoiding the booby traps, they then proceed to start violently kicking doors open and barging into rooms, because these episodes are only 45 minutes and we've got to pick up the pace. And speaking of picking up, that's something that the mother of these boys isn't going to be able to do due to having the ends of her limbs removed. After walking into a room and being screamed at by a disabled person, they pull her out from beneath the bed that discover that she's attached to a board with wheels to move around, because you don't need shins to do cool ass kickflips. This is when they both come to the realization that she's in fact not a kidnap victim, but the boy's mother. She survived the accident 10 years ago, but her limbs didn't. Believing that one of the brothers is actually also the father as well somehow, Scully eventually manages to get Mrs. Peacock to talk to her, as she explains that her entire family doesn't feel pain. Her arms and legs were torn off in the accident, but she didn't feel a thing, as she's cracked the code to the expensive American healthcare system. Incest. The men return to the house after spotting Mulder and Scully's footprints outside, as Scully is forced to shoot one of them as they seem to mistake Mulder for the floor by trying to put a chair on him. A shot that doesn't really seem to bother him, as pain is a man-made concept created by the CIA to keep you down, and takes multiple other point-blank shots, but just keeps coming. Eventually, Mulder is able to turn the lights off for good in him, as another chasing Scully trips over and is impaled by one of his own traps. And if my math serves me correct, that means that there's one final brother still lurking around somewhere, but no matter where the pair look, he and the mother/wife have disappeared. Hiding out in the boot of the car with his mother, because the boot is really just an extra seat if you think about it, the episode comes to an end with the mother explaining that it's time for them to leave and find a new home where they can start another family. So before this video comes to an end, I'd like to just give a massive shout out and a big thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons, the people who every month continue to go out of their way to help support the channel. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or patron yourself, not only are you just generally being a great help to the channel, but you also get access to a few little perks, like being able to join the private Discord server, where you can then get links to all uncensored versions of videos going forward. So starting off with this week's new YouTube signups, a massive thank you to Trevor Kendall, Matthew Hartman, James, Ashley Taylor, Travis Pribliski, Christiana Donahue, It's Emily, Ryan Worthington Mann, Kim Adrian Magadeo, Conan, Ridley01, Thomas Stewart, Luna, Big Bird, Jennifer Delgadillo, Sunganth Fandavarian, Reigns VT, KJ, Splendid S, Etterman, Blood Eagle, Roxanne Vivo, Bex, Just Correct, and Mr. Smiles. And now heading over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to NSX, Matthias, A Person, Jared, King Rabbler, Justin Jackson, Borkley, DK, James Valdez, Lil Rose, Matt Muska, Zane AM, Christopher Baker, Sierra Alexis, Jackim Baker, Patchy, Heather, Brooke Perry, Easy for Control, and Seckle the Angel. So once again, a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.